Unless Zimbabwe's opposition puts its act together, the thunder that is going to strike it is still doing push-ups in heaven. Events over the past 2 years should serve as a wake-up call for the splintered and faltering opposition to snap out of its long slumber and act, for it is in a fine mess. In this article, I deal with Nelson Chamisa's component of MDC, for as long they are using that name. Part 2 will deal with Douglas Mwonzora and his entity. Chamisa, I still contend, does not have the character or sobriety to lead Zimbabwe's opposition to the once vibrant movement it used to be. He has brought in too much of his flawed personality to make that possible. Take, for instance, how he postures as deity and the consensual personalization of the struggle to a supreme being who is beyond criticism. Even that, as it may be, the Bible exhorts us to pray for wisdom, calls us to a place of humility and love as a reflection of faith in Christ Jesus. Even harder to fathom that a modern-day political party in 2021 has a papa before whom fellow comrades must kneel, be prayed for to receive their blessing. The spiritualization of that struggle, instead of working strategies, people are fed Bible verses. People who belong to their own churches by default of being Chamisa's followers have to stretch their faith into politics to a guy whose beliefs are otherwise contrary to their own. The painful result of which have included losing legal rights to the MDC name and assets. There is always a price for deception, pride, mediocrity, and arrogance. Furthermore, for a Christian with a love for humanity, his failure to provide a credible, genuine response to COVID-19, offering national leadership and not politicizing or seeking to trivialize a global pandemic. Almost 2 years after the 2018 harmonized elections, Zimbabwe's opposition component led by Chamisa is stuck in the past with no visible plan for the future. The crucial 2023 election, which in political terms are just around the corner. No campaign or dialogue for crucial reforms, without which the opposition campaign efforts are dead in the water. By design stuck in 2018 mode because Chamisa in his vendetta has personalized the election outcome, continuing to parrot calls for legitimacy but offering no realistic roadmap forward or strategy that unites Zimbabweans of all walks of life. Most civil society organizations, everyone has moved on. Chamisa remains stuck. Chamisa, true to character, has chosen to throw the toys out to the pram. His tantrums now a nuisance ritual each time that his lack of leadership is exposed. The legitimacy issue becomes an easy tool for distraction. The late icon Morgan Tsvangirai's death left the movement he once valiantly and fearlessly led at 60s and 70s clueless as to how to steer the once great movement forward, a vacuum painfully felt each day. The organization that once stood tall globally as a champion of human rights and democratic principles is getting unstuck as it fails within itself to practice what it preaches. There is no brother skipper. Emotions have been high, fingers being pointed, which is found after Lillian Temvios and Blessing Chebundo recently openly in broad daylight joined ZANU-PF, where they were welcomed by its first secretary Emerson Mnangagwa. A gullible opposition membership is convinced by party leadership that they have crossed over to ZANU-PF for money. Chamisa supporters take no prisoners in their vile attacks, some who ironically were tormenting us in ZANU-PF only a few months ago, our blood fresh on their hands. Strangely, this also said by beneficiaries of a long commodified opposition movement. How many shirts did Chamisa have at the formation of the MDC? People who have over the years benefited from the benevolence of kind Zimbabweans and the donor community, not that they possess any brilliance or social verticality. An activist gets special access to programs in the University of Zimbabwe, scholarships, rent paid for. Others have even had cars bought for them, not to mention those who bought houses. Not many of them know how a CV is written of 20 years in struggle lagers, and will fail to account for their social status should a genuine lifestyle audit be carried out. Many, like Roy Bennett, I met him in New York. He was tired and distraught. He had lost all, recovering from prison days and a cancer attack. He also had many tales to tell. Story for another day. In 2005, the late Morgan Tsvangirai called me back home from Europe. I was doing just fine with my life, my children. I'm a hard worker. I do not survive on an house. And life disrupted, I regret going back to this day. I cannot cry over spilled milk. Tsvangirai was in trouble, not from external enemies, but internal ones. Sabotaging, gossiping, the rot was in the party. Unlike Chebundo or Temvias, tormented Tsvangirai could not defect from his own party. He mobilized us internally to work at times, even with parallel structures, when people pontificate state about the 2008 election victory, they do so without a full story. The rot, corruption, hatred of fellow comrades against each other, the kind of nonsense those like Temvios who are defecting today are tired of. Dismissing them as just political prostitutes will be costly, a narrative that suits Chamisa well in his grandstanding and deception. He deceives those that only wake to opposition politics post-2017. They only know Chamisa and a well-manicured narrative of who he is, overrated contribution to the struggle, thus they attack without care. They do not know who Chebundo is, they do not know who the late Mukiana is, they do not know who many others are. That's how Chamisa has framed it, but then it's getting undone. Of particular interest to me is how their character was impugned or called into question by members of a movement that is homogeneous from all angles in a failing post-Changirai transition. Timvios going in a key province means ZANU-PF is doing its math. 2023 will be too late to start screaming rigging and legitimacy. Temvios was a key member not just in the province but at the national level, possessing an influential global reach. Worrisome it should be for the MDC that she is now Mnangagwa's ally. Name calling is not an option, strategy and sobriety are. The unraveling of the opposition taking place today does not only have national consequences because ZANU-PF remains cunning doing its mathematics, it also has global ramifications. The MDC was born out of a dream whose time, it seemed, had come in global politics and indeed on the African continent. The Berlin Wall had fallen, apartheid South Africa collapsed, the talk and calls for multi-party democracy were loud and clear. These people had no real ideology binding glue apart from issues with the status choir at the time, riding on the apparent global winds of change based on the mistaken notion of assumptions that one-party states or nationalist movements were easy to break. For Zimbabwe, it has been a blow for blow. The fixation of the international community was one on the late former President Robert Mugabe. There was a strong focus against him with conclusions that he was at the epicenter of everything that was wrong in ZANU-PF and by extension in Zimbabwe's national politics. A script today that goes horribly wrong when a senior opposition leader, Tendai Biti, publicly says he misses Mugabe. I continue to write.